Thuy, you never had Mr. Ramos because he just arrived when you were leaving. So I think you guys had a 1-year crossover. Thuy was class of 08. She was a volleyball player. She was my basketball manager / secretary.
Pretty much.
/ personal assistant.
Taskmaster.
She helped me in all the areas where I am weak. So she was an integral part of our team. I tried to get her to play, but she's tall enough for volleyball at 5 foot, but not tall enough for basketball, I guess.
I'm 4'10". It's wonderful.
Sorry, I gave you too much credit.
Just a little.
So I have a great picture because, Apple reminds you of pictures from the past. A picture popped up from your graduation. Where did you graduate from and what year?
Preuss 08, then Pomona College in 2012, then USC with a master's in public health in 2015.
All right, and I was talking about the Pomona. The Pomona graduation was the one where the picture popped up. And so you got your master's in 2015, and
Yes.
Now what do you do?
Now I run a nonprofit that serves charter school leaders in California. We primarily focus on risk management, school safety, and risk pooling, which is an alternative to insurance, essentially a more safe and encompassing approach that supports the schools more.
All right. Now, as we've done Kneeling and Healing, we're usually talking to people making social change, not corporate stiffs. But why do you think that we would want to have you on? Why would you be a good person to interview for making social change and what we're doing and talking about with Kneeling and Healing?
So to me, social change isn't always just the big picture in terms of the big movements, the big protests or big signs out there. It's also the day-to-day and the trauma of the day-to-day. When you're in a workplace, no matter if it's in schools, no matter if it's in a nonprofit or in corporate America, you're dealing with it. And I think being able to speak about it, maybe not even have all the answers, but have certain progress, have words to put to it is very important, right? How do you process when you're say in an academic environment and you're taught all of these things and you're taught to be aware of racism, to be aware of sexism and the intersectionality of pretty much all of that. And then go to a corporate place. And I remember, one of my first jobs in corporate America, and I was like the lowest rung on that job. And I had a boss who said, well, all Asians drown more because they're so quiet. And how do you respond to that in a workplace? And then also using your voice, how do you use your voice and your privilege in a workplace to then speak for those who don't have that voice?
So you have worked your way up, and now you are in a position where you have much more power than you did when you were entry level.
Right.
And so you have the ability to actually create social change because you have more power to do that. How do you do that? How do you harness that power?
Now it's a great ability to affect change from a policy level. It's the ability to say, even with a quote unquote solidarity statement, right? You're speaking as the one who leads an organization. And I can't really speak to being in the profit world. I'm very lucky to be where I want to be in the nonprofit world. But to have a board that you can have a conversation with to actually implement change in the organization. To say, let's have this day off, let's recognize this, let's talk about these resources. What does professional development look like? And then trickle that down and model that so that everyone in the organization understands why that's so important. I'm blessed to be in a position where I can do that. But I also understand when I'm in a position where I was not able to do that, to still be able to affect some change around me. And I know that, you know, just because I'm the CEO of an organization doesn't mean that everyone's going to listen to me. It doesn't mean that it's going to be integrated into the culture just because I say so. So how do you make that cultural shift so that peers and colleagues can talk to each other and also to implement that for themselves? That dynamic is different.
Solidarity statement.
Sorry, repeat that?
What is a solidarity statement? You mentioned that earlier.
So after a lot of the recent murders that have started more mass protests and more awareness of Black Lives Matter and the movement of the inequitability of Black lives in America, a lot of companies have come out with statements that say we stand with Black lives or we stand with Black Lives Matter. That is essentially the solidarity statement I'm talking about. Now, I think there's two sides to that. One, I think it's just people who've never ever talked about it before, and it's almost kind of just a visual show. And then two, it's also a way to say, truly, what is this organization for? What do you stand for when you have to pick a value? What do you stand for? And how do you go beyond just a statement, right? What are the services provided? What are the supports needed? How do you have the resources? Where do you even start? And for me, it's a spectrum. You don't just expect everyone to already know how to approach the topic. You can't expect everyone to already have that history or that understand or knowledge. So for those who've never approached the topic, where do you start with that? And I think a good solidarity statement essentially has to start there.
I've got a question for you. There's a term I've heard in politics that I think applies here as well. I think it's personnel is policy. You know, it's the people that you hire and the culture that they create and that they share that really filters into the policies that you have. Because you can have policies on paper, but if the people aren't invested in carrying them out, then it's pretty limited. Now that you're CEO, how do you see yourself being able to affect the personnel and the people in your organization that maybe weren't there when you were lower rung, like this man who made that comment about Asians? How do you see yourself now in this position where you can really shift the people that are in the offices with you?
Well, I wouldn't say in the offices. I want to be safe during coronavirus times, so everyone is remote. But I would say it's just a matter of getting people to more. So we're giving them the resources to understand more of the nuances of when things are okay and when things aren't okay. And then if you're ever confronted with that, say on a team call or even on a one-on-one call, to be able to take a moment and say, how do we connect our values to that? How do we have a conversation where it's a productive one? Can we not attack each other? And what are the resources to be able to have the soft skills to be able to have that conversation? For me, it's the ability to do certain trainings on facilitation, which we're working on. The ability to say, here, listen to these podcasts, read these books, understand, see these infographics. I mean, something very easy, right? Mm-hmm. But a way to say, all right, let's take a moment of pause. Or even in a meeting, if it's something that's substantial, that's going to completely impede teamwork, to say, let's acknowledge it. Yeah, I know that wasn't the initial plan of this meeting, but let's take a moment to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As an immigrant Vietnamese American, where did you develop your interest in social justice? And how have you been able to brand that with who you are now?
A huge part of that was more intentionally so at Pomona College for me. Pomona did a really great job outside of just the classroom to have support groups, to have training. So I was an Asian American mentor in the AMP program at Pomona. I was in the resident hall staff, and both of those programs, to become a mentor, to become a resident hall staff, did diversity training, where it was intensive week or 2 weeks of this is what it means historically in America to be various peoples of color. This is what it means to be LGBTQ+. All of that, really giving the language to it. And for me, and you're not going to like this, Mr. Carr, but I hated history in high school. Absolutely hated history. I got a 2 on both of my history APs.
You weren't in my class, so that's cool.
Valid.
And I didn't either, so go.
And my interest in history didn't really start until college, really, to really understand that history is not just a singular lens. It's written by, frankly, the oppressor or the winner, whichever one you want to call it in this case. And to understand the intricacies of it brings a different lens, and I think in a lot of ways made me reflect on my interplay in all of that. So, which made it very hard to go out of it and then go into a workplace where, for the first time in my life, I was absolutely very minority, and realized that those around me did not at all have that baseline language, right? We did not have a common language to talk about these issues, to even approach a conversation of these issues. So in a lot of ways, that really defined how I want my role to be in that area of society as well, is how do I do that where if I'm here and they're here, where there's no meeting in the middle. So how do you do that? How do you set that baseline so that there can be conversation?